It's a delight to be here. And what I wanted to do was share a few ideas about this book called Scaling Up Excellence. But first, a couple of words about myself. I'm originally from India. My family in India is bimodally distributed. So the more western part of the family is called me Huggy since birth. The more traditional part of the family is called me Uggy. You can call me Uggy, you can call me Huggy. I treat both the same. So it's not a moniker I've acquired when I came to the United States. I think in 1983, so it's a long, long time. I've spent more than half my life here. So this book is actually sort of unusual. And for me, it's sort of, I never ever thought I would write a book like this. I never even thought I would be a professor. I finished business school in India in 1980. And the weird thing was when I finished business school in India, one of the textbooks we had to read was actually a textbook written by somebody who's going to be with you tomorrow, my colleague Jeffrey Pfeffer. So in 1980, I was like 21, and if somebody told me, hey, you're going to be Jeffrey's colleague, I'd have asked them, what are you smoking? It was just the farthest thing from my mind. And in 1981, you also had Scaling Up, In Search of Excellence. And the weird thing was to think that I would write a book along with my good buddy Bob Sutton on Scaling Up Excellence was also something very far from my imagination. I was particularly touched when Tom Peters, actually, the author, one of the authors of Scaling Up, In Search of Excellence, actually endorsed the book. A couple of things about this book. How did this book begin? It began 7 years ago. And it began in part because of a theme that Bashir just alluded to, innovation. Bob, who's in engineering, and I, who's in the business school at Stanford, we actually direct a program called Customer-Focused Innovation. We call it Clean Models. That's social science in the mornings, dirty hands, a real challenge in the afternoon. In the first edition, in 2006, we gave them a real problem, and the real problem in the afternoon was to reimagine the gas station. And it was amazing, the ideas people came up with. One such idea was they just told British Petroleum, don't bother spending money on gas stations and making them into convenience stores. Nobody wants to go there. They're too dirty. Instead, you actually go to the customer. People said, how? Think of yourself as an employee solution opportunity. Google does free lubes. Why can't they fill gas for you while your car is in the parking lot? And they came up with interesting ways of doing that. And one company, one of the fastest growing companies in the Inc. 500 list exactly does that. But anyway, at the end of the program, when people asked us, how do you scale this? Bob gave an answer, I gave an answer. That evening over Pinot Noir, both of us stay a couple of streets from each other in Menlo Park, I asked Bob, I said, what do you think of your answer? He said, what do you think of yours? I said, well, my answer was pathetic, I said. I said, what do you think of yours? He said, mine was tragically bad. And then we said, if we really don't know the answers to scaling, what do we do? So both of us independently quickly realized we should do what professors do. When you're clueless about something, the best way to learn it is, of course, to do research on it. Or an even nicer way to do it is to offer a course. When you offer a course to 60 students, MBAs and engineers who are real smart, you really got to figure out, my God, what's the scaling problem all about? And you have to give them a tough enough problem so you can understand what the challenges are. And that year on the Stanford campus, we broke students into 5-person teams, randomly assigned dorms and sports teams to them, and gave them a simple challenge. Scale the usage of bicycle helmets amongst bike riders on the Stanford campus. It is a very hard problem. When you're an undergrad, you think you're immortal. You think you're invincible. And you think the university is a very safe place to be. Getting these people to wear them, that was a challenge. And we learned an enormous amount. Next year, the project we did was with the US Army. We had one of the generals who came to our program, and he said, look, we need to scale insights from the front line in Afghanistan, because he quickly divined a problem in any large organization. As he told me, he says, Huggy, as you get higher up in the organization, the solutions get dumber. And, there's some truth to that, though not entirely. So think of a simple problem. You're a soldier, you're returning from Afghanistan, and what did the Army do? They greeted you with a 200-item questionnaire. and say, can you tell us what you think about all of these things? And this is right when you're about to get off the plane. What do you think most soldiers are going to do? You think you'll fill a 200-item questionnaire? No way. So you're never going to be able to capture any of their insights. What we were able to do was create, the students rather, they were able to create peer-to-peer networks, Amazon-type recommendations, things that had never happened actually in the US Army. So they're trying all of these things out. So 7 years later, we've actually had this book. And I thought I'd touch on a few things. And the book marries research with case study, with observations, with help from lots of executives, with the study of successes and failures. But first, a quick provisional definition of excellence. What's excellence? You and I could debate what Plato said, or Aristotle said, or Confucius said, or whatever. But I'm a social scientist. For us, excellence is very simple. People do the right thing even when nobody is looking over their shoulder. If you've got to police people, if you've got to monitor them, you don't have an excellent operation. Sure, you could beat your competitors for a while. Sure, you could exceed what customers want for a while. But your structure is going to become unwieldy. It's just a matter of time before you might be actually wiped off the list of the Fortune 500 as was indicated here. So why is this a problem? In any organization, you have a pocket of excellence. If you want to spread it, you run into voltage loss. You're the Cleveland Clinic. You're in Cleveland. You go to Abu Dhabi. Try spreading it there. You quickly realize how powerful voltage loss is. And the problem is, how do you scale something without screwing things up? And this is particularly a problem in large organizations, because what we know as an empirical regularity is the larger the organization, the more likely that the smart people inside it become dumber. I'm not suggesting by any means that smart people become stupid. I'm simply saying they become silent. And what's the enemy of excellence in any large enterprise? It's never what is said in a meeting. It's invariably what is unsaid in a meeting. All of you are savvy enough to sort of recognize that. If you oversample what is said, don't pay enough attention to what is unsaid, you're actually going to make terrible decisions in terms of resource allocation and the like. Here are a bunch of examples. Small company called Pulse, now acquired by LinkedIn. There's Stanford students, they would call Bob and me and say, hey, we have a scaling problem. And we'd say, how come? Oh, we grew from 2 to 7. And it's all in one room. And for them, it really was a scaling problem. Google grows so hugely, or McDonald's grows so hugely. To illustrate what the scaling problem is, I want to sort of rely briefly on a wonderful venture capitalist who gave this analogy. He said, when you think of a startup, it's like beach volleyball. How many people are there in beach volleyball? 2. Do you have any substitutes? No. What's your game plan? Make sure the ball doesn't hit the sand. Now scale from 2 to 6, regular volleyball. Specialized positions? Do you have substitutes? Yes. Do you have coaches? Yes. So there's Marcus, he's on the opposing team. Marcus actually gives a serve. Jim's on my team, and Varujan, did I pronounce your name rightly? So he's on my team. So Marcus serves, I receive the serve, I give it to Varujan, who actually supplies it for our ace striker, Jim. Jim arcs into the air and smashes the ball into the net. Sorry, Jim. I had to set you up a little bit. Now the question is, whose fault was that? Was it Jim's? Was it mine? Was it his? Or was the serve simply unplayable? You quickly realize what happened when you went from 2 to 6. Now imagine going to 60, 600, 6,000, 60,000. You just get the scale of the problem. What's the main point in our book? The main point in our book is very simple. When we think scaling, often we think in terms of footprint-related metrics. They're wonderful things to think about. They're very relevant. They're very important. But the catch is, if you only think about the footprint and you forget the mindset, you run into problems. What's the mindset? Very simple for us. You have to ask 2 questions. What's sacred in your organization? What's taboo? And when you think of the sacred and taboo, I always look for verbs and adverbs. Nouns are utterly boring. Nouns are abstractions. I asked an executive in a large company, and one of their values, if you will, or mindset is ingenuity. And I said, what is ingenuity? Tell me. And I was looking at my watch. It took the person 25 seconds to tell me what ingenuity meant. So I said, you got 40,000 people. How many of them will actually spend 25 seconds on this problem? What do you think most people are going to do? Ingenuity? I don't get it, I'm going to forget it. So instead, when you use verbs and adverbs, very different. Here's Facebook. They talk about be bold, be quick, make an impact. And individuals instantly get it, particularly after their boot camp, where at the end of it, they give you a real problem you have to solve, so you can call your girlfriend or boyfriend or wife or husband and say, hey, remember that thing about Facebook you didn't like? I actually fixed it. So I asked Chris Cox, say, Chris, what happens after this if you can't solve this problem in 3 days? He says, we fire you. I said, why? He said, well, engineers don't like to fire other engineers, he says. We just take care of the problem right away. But by the end of it, do they know what being bold is, making an impact is? Absolutely. Now, this is not to mean that the Facebook mindset is appropriate for everybody. I'm sure a number of colleagues from VMware will say, we make products if we ask people to be bold, to break things and so forth. Some of our products are made in environments where reliability matters. We need to take a very different look at this. So what's the overscaling problem? If you forget the mindset and only focus on the footprint, you run into what Starbucks ran into when they moved from 1,000 to 13,000 outlets. What did they do? They watered down the customer experience.